What's a rich person thing that you only learned about when you grew up? Story 1. Private doctors. You buy into their practice. They limit the amount of patients they take so as to give better services. They just call to check in regularly so as to take care of you. Story 2. Furniture is not supposed to touch the walls. Edited to add the reason being your living area is so large. The furniture can be arranged so it doesn't touch the walls. Think of the crown. Queen Elizabeth's furniture did not touch any walls. Story 3. Really rich people have their own family investment firm with a full office of employees that manage their money and assets. Like imagine an entire small hedge fund or PE firm with MBAs and CFAs, but just for the money of a family. Story 4. Internships through family friends. Like I thought internships were something you applied for, but I guess apparently they're also passed down like heirlooms. Story 5. Taking loans out on assets at 3, just to throw it into a fund that makes 5. It's like an infinite money hack if you have the capital and can afford the risk. Story 6. Trust funds, staff, private bankers. Like, when I went to university and some of the kids just got on a chartered plane to go to Negril or Goa, and when I said I couldn't afford it, one said, "Ask your banker, girl." My banker was a teller. Story 7. That people actually renovate perfectly good kitchens just because they're bored of the color. Like the stove works, the fridge is fine, but we're going for a new vibe. Must be nice. Story 8. Using money to make more money. I thought you just got a good job, kept getting promoted, and you would eventually make so money you would be rich. Turns out you take the sizable sums of money you have, and use that to invest in ways that make that money grow way faster than just earning more by working. It's wild. Story 9. Once you have enough money, a lot of problems just go away. I don't want to deal with my lawn, so I hired a guy. Same with my cleaning lady. She comes twice a week and also does laundry and dishes. It's not like I never have to wash dishes ever, but generally speaking all this stuff just gets done. Story 10. Full-size candy bars given away at Halloween. My friend did this. He also had his barbecue running in the driveway and handed out hot dogs and cans of soda. The parents loved getting to his house. He set up his laptop in the front yard and projected It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown onto a makeshift movie screen, and kids would sit on blankets in front eating hot dogs. Dude was awesome. While he did this, his wife took their 4 kids around the neighborhood to trick-or-treat. Story 11. Went for jury duty in Silicon Valley. During jury selection, the judge asked if anyone had been involved in a kidnapping or attempted kidnapping. A surprising amount of hands went up. Story 12. Rich people think that everyone who's not financially rich is playing the same status games they are and just failing to win. They don't realize some people aren't chasing the same goals and feel perfectly content with their relatively simple lifestyles. Story 13. The more money I have, the colder I get in the summer. It's a privilege to be able to sleep with a hoodie and 2 blankets when it's 100 degrees outside, and I keep it a cool 68 inside. Story 14. That you go to an Ivy out of obligation and social standing, not because you actually want to or earn getting in. It's just a given in your social circles regardless of your grades you're getting in, because everyone who's anyone knows someone on the board of trustees of the Ivy. Story 15. I read a comment from UFP67. Essentially working just to pass time. Ever ask a boomer manager or VP why they still work? It's never "Oh, I'm saving for retirement." It's something like "I don't know what else LD dole like to work, ID get bored, etc." And do you know why 60 years old, they want to work more than the rest of us? It's because at that point in their career they're doing fuck all. They read reports, tweak some stuff, and maintain client relations with other boomers in partnered orgs. Every VP level of this age LVE known comes into the office when they feel like it. If they feel like it, read the news, chat with coworkers, call and chat with partners, and head out early. That's it. Of course they're not going to give up a position that pays the most for the least work with zero risk of firing. Story 16. That the horrors of growing up very poor and very very rich have some overlap. They never see their parents. Everything is about money. Immense amount of pressure for you to do something extraordinary. Nobody really cares about you as a person because of your class and use you as an object or tool. Actual close friendships are much harder because of the classism pushed on you. Story 17. They always hide their trash cans like it's their life savings. I dog sit for a lot of privileged people, and the most annoying part is finding the trash. Hiring cleaners is another one. I always wondered how rich people kept these huge houses so clean. Now I know it's because they don't. Also, what the do you guys snack on? Never any junk food. All I ever see in these houses are raw nuts and dried fruit. Now I know y'all are sneaking potato chips or a Pop-Tart. Don't even front. Story 18. Buy borrow die tax strategy. When you own more than about 5M in liquid stock or business assets, and you don't want to sell it and pay taxes on the gains to buy other stuff, you can borrow at extremely low rates against the assets you own. By choosing to borrow against what they own, they avoid capital gains taxes. So long as the appreciation exceeds the loan rate, this can continue in perpetuity. If they die owning the asset, it will step up in basis upon death, and no tax is owed between the difference of the original purchase price and the value on death. There is no limit to the amount that it can appreciate, and borrowing can exceed the value of the asset borrowed against. Story 19. You may have heard that all rich and famous people know each other, and it's like a club. Well, that's actually kind of true. Very rich or famous people all go to exclusive expensive vacation locations. They aren't renting Airbnbs like normal people. Only rich people can afford to go to these places, so everyone they meet there is also very rich. This is how they network and meet each other. Famous people also go because they won't be bothered there. I got invited to one of these vacations, and it kind of blew my mind. Story 20. My friend is wildly rich. He does what he wants when he wants how he wants and answers to nobody. No daily grinds, no punching the clock, no answering to a boss. Just flying to different countries every month. Story 21. What we consider luxury brands are nothing compared to the uber-rich. Not only is everything customized, but they are purchasing extremely niche items for exorbitant prices that we have never even heard of. Story 22. I always thought that everyone worked at least part of their lives, enough 10 years to qualify for Social Security and hence Medicare, but there are actually people who reach retirement, not having worked at least 40 quarters, nor did their spouse, and their kids have no plans to work either, so strange to someone from the working class. Story 23. Growing up, we always had a doctor who would come to our home, accompany us to the hospital, etc. I had no idea that we were subscribed to a health service. We were in Europe, one time when I was a kid, and my stepmother fell ill. The doctor and his 2 sons, who are both members of the service, flew to our home there, took my stepmom to India, ended up performing the surgery there, and she was back home in a couple of weeks. Well, I had no idea that other PPL didn't also have this until I said it to a group of friends one time. I didn't act like I was anything different, but they did. I didn't FKN know. Story 24. When you enter a rich person's home, there's a buffer between the entrance and their living space, like a foyer or some, but in poor people homes, you enter directly into their living space, like their family room or something, immediately up in there. Story 25. Phoenix companies. I had a client in finance, who explained this to me. The company goes bankrupt, the shareholders lose all their money, but actually whatever money is still left, is preserved through a bunch of economic chicanery, and then funneled into a new enterprise. The fat cats on top lose nothing. Story 26. Currently vacationing in Telluride, Colorado in a 3mm condo that we rented for like $1,500 for 3 nights. One thing we've noticed is that people just leave their 5,000 bikes unchained on the bike racks. My 15-year-old 250 bike gets chained like Pee-wee's Big Adventure anytime I have to even run into the convenience store. Story 27. They talk about once-in-a-life dreams, at least for most of people on the planet, like we talk about to eat in a McDonald's, literally. I saw it happens not long time ago, maybe months, 2 friends, boy and girl in their 40s, talking about their life experiences and saying what they want to do or not to do, again, like we talk about the best restaurant in our neighborhood. They were talking about traveling around the world, best executives airlines classes, private jets, best extreme sports they had tried or want to try, etc. You have to fly over the Everest. Is amazing. Oh, now I'm going to do it next time I have a spare time. It, sadly for me, make me sad. It must not affect me, but it did it. Maybe because I was really into that girl, and it just crushed my dream. Story 28. That you can leverage imaginary money that you don't have into tangible money that you do have and really don't have a lot of penalties if you're wrong. And also by doing this way, you're not paying taxes because it's all imaginary and you're just spending your money. See Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter and how he financed it. It's ridiculous. If you try to do that with like 100 grand, you would be arrested. But if you're doing it with 20 billion, people are knocking at your door. Story 29. The rich don't take their cars for service. A tow company picks it up and delivers it when it's done, or they hire mechanics to come to their homes and service them there. Story 30. Plates of food. I've only been in restaurants where 1 plate is delivered and picked up, but rich people have 6-course meals or whatever, with multiple plates. Story 31. I don't know if this is a thing anymore, but since I visited my grandmother's rich friend in the most 1970s apartment I had ever been to, and it had central vacuuming, there were outlets in the wall that you can just stick a hose into, and it vacuums into something central in the basement. Story 32. Bonuses. I knew about Christmas bonuses and such, but had no idea that once you reach a certain level in most companies you get an extra 25k to 100k just because. Story 33. My aunt used to be in high-end real estate sale in a major US market. To even see the listings through her firm you needed to go through an approval process and be worth around 50M. These homes were kept under wraps and were very private. Story 34. Money laundering. You're in a wealthy room when they're casually talking about cleaning hiding money strategies, like real estate deals in Russia in the 90s. You could recover from bankruptcy if you did property deals in Moscow to launder money for the Russian mob. Important to avoid any behavior they could blackmail you with later though, even if you really wanted those hoes to on you. Story 35. Scentlessness. All of the important people at the company my ex worked for smelled like nothing at all, not deodorant, not laundry soap, they get everything dry cleaned, not scented shampoo, not BO, just nothing. Even if you smushed up close to them in the lift you wouldn't smell anything. Either they were really clean, or they were actually robots. Expensive perfumes are actually marketed to lower and middle class folks. The upper class wants nothing to do with them. Story 36. My parents were immigrants who had great jobs in the USA. Back home, they weren't allowed to own land or property because of their religion and beliefs, so, all their money went into property. If I got a bean burrito and a water from Taco Bell, that was eating out. However, when it came to college, I was denied any scholarships because my parents were too rich, we had no money, it was all assets. I learned that at 17. Story 37. Rich people dress nicely. Millionaires dress like homeless except for the shoes and the smell. In time you learn to recognize the actually expensive colognes. I learned that from a Bentley salesman. Story 38. The difference in what people mean when they say they can't afford something. To rich people, it means I'd prefer not to spend my money on that, though I could if I really wanted to. To poor people it means, I physically lack the funds to do so. Story 39 The Joy of Not Flying Commercial. I'd hated flying as a kid but private. It's the difference between being in a hurricane and a balmy spring breeze edit. Not having to think about hygiene and what the cleaning crew has missed is a bonus. Story 40 Running the air conditioning. I thought that was rich people stuff until I got older, realized it barely adds to the bill, and learned Gen X was just cheap. Story 41 The feeling that no matter what happens, things will probably work out okay for you because your family likely has the financial means to partially if not completely bail you out of whatever adverse situation you found yourself in. The feeling that you are not only deserving of a positive outcome of any given situation but entitled to one, regardless of however much effort you've put in. Living in even some degree of poverty is living in fear, and rich people absolutely do not have this and often fail to compute what it's even like to live with the fear that if something goes even slightly awry for you, your whole life can fall apart and you can risk not having your basic needs met. Story 42 Worked at a private fine dining restaurant for almost 2 years, wild what you hear behind closed doors, but one thing you learn rather quickly even without listening to their conversations, is that rich marries rich. That's it. It explains a lot of my childhood as my dad managed to scrounge enough money for us to go to a private school. A good chunk of my classmates ran in the same circle, had no idea till I worked at this restaurant and I saw one of them and subsequently served him. I was bullied to high heaven growing up, specifically by the rich boys. Looking back, it's because they saw me as lesser, as they were taught that their only equals were those of their class, which is why rich only marries rich. No one else matters in their eyes and it's ingrained from a young age. Story 43 Apparently, rich people have vacation homes that they don't rent out. As a kid, I thought everyone who had a second house rented it to make money. I only realized as an adult that some people just have entire homes sitting empty for most of the year and just waiting for them to feel like going to the beach. Blew my mind. Story 44 When you're so rich that your money makes money and you can live off of the money that your money makes, the average American has debt interest. This interest is what pays the rich money interest. Our debt is quite literally funding their free money. Story 45 Borrowing millions or billions against your assets and spending the money then selling some of the assets so you pay no tax because you're incredibly in debt. Story 46 Cheating on taxes. Paying as little as possible to everyone, philanthropy etc. I thought most people who had lots of money worked really hard for it and earned it, certainly not always the case. Story 47 Debutante. I was not aware of this world at all until matched up with my debutante roommate in college. It was so eye-opening and foreign to me. We could not have been more different. Him from a very blue-collar family, but we bonded so much that she officiated my wedding 15 years later. Story 48 Buying expensive things in the off-season. I remember a surgeon I worked with was going to buy his kids high-end hockey skates in June because they just got marked down 40 because no one buys skates in June. Buy when they are cheaper, not when you need them. Story 49 A very well-to-do old money guy and I were chatting. This is a small village and everyone knows everything about everyone. I asked him about his older car when he could afford a new one every year. He said he had no vanity and no need to impress his employees. His old Chevy ran fine. Story 50 Seeing rules as how much it costs to do the thing instead of regulations principles. To everyone else, being charged or fined for not following rules is upsetting punishment. It wasn't until I was getting ready to go to college heard older students talking about how they didn't bother to pay for the student parking because they knew they'd leave a car someplace it wasn't supposed to be longer than time allotted that I realized that when you come from or have money that fine cost. The same applies to staying in a hotel with people who smoke, but only non-smoking rooms are available. Those $200 to $1,500 cleaning fees would make me cry, but I have encountered it costs X to smoke, because we're smoking people in my life. Story 51 That there are peer networks just for rich people. They discuss investments mostly, but it's a way to validate their thoughts and actions, and that people with generational or inherited wealth are viewed differently to self-made wealth. Story 52 The most important thing I failed to understand as a child is that the working middle class buy lots of junk and the rich generate wealth. It was a hard lesson to learn because my father came from nothing and generated a little wealth, but now I see all the people around me are working middle class. They earn hundreds of thousands a year and spend it all on car leases, massive homes, and don't have a penny to their name. Rich people don't have a car lease, they lend the money and generate more of it. Story 53 Intensive networking in order to help their kids find jobs and internships. That was why kids from rich families got internships starting in high school while us normies tutored, lifeguard, babysat, and made fast food sandwiches. Story 54 Family. Sure, they might have huge legal inheritance battles, but in general they all know each other and have contacts on speed dial. For myself, I barely know where my own dad is, much less other members of my family, cousins, aunts, uncles. I'm sure they are alive somewhere, but I've not seen them in decades or ever. Quite sad about it, but that's life. Story 55 They most likely got their money from their parents' family given to them. While they may have made some choices to continue the wealth, more often than not a rich person thing is having money or land handed over. Story 56 I bought into Zoom does not mean they've subscribed to a paid account. A lesson I learned during peak COVID and my response was the organization I work at did this. Story 57 Maybe it's because I grew up very poor, or perhaps it was plain neglect, but mental health orthodontics and dermatology seemed only attainable for the elite when I was young. Story 58 Going to the fair, the zoo, to the museum, whenever I wanted. There are still fairs, the zoo and the museum are still open, but I never go because it's a decision of having a few hours of fun or having food on the table for the whole month. I'm 45 now. When I was a child everything was so cheap because zoo, museum, fairs got subsidized by the state. Now there is a whole generation of kids whose parents cannot afford to give their kids these kind of memories, which makes me feel very sad for the kids. Story 59 I work for a wealthy family. When the family goes on vacation, they stage multiple commercial flights, so the entire family is not on the same plane in case of crash. Friends of theirs had a private jet that went down and the entire family passed 3 generations, and a dynasty of wealth just evaporated. After that, who I work for sold their jet and set up this system to prevent this kind of family loss. Story 60 I had no idea people actually bought brand new cars every year until I started working as a receptionist at a law firm. My boss would come in with a different luxury vehicle each spring like it was totally normal while I was still driving my 15-year-old Honda. Story 61 My parents had a bungalow on Key Biscayne when we were little. School's out, pack up the station wagon, drive from LA to Miami for the summer. Dad would come down for a week or so around July 4th weekend. My grandparents and aunt would come down week before Labor Day, then back home before school started right after a Jewish holiday. Bet my father kicked himself later on, wishing he hadn't sold it when my mother died, but I guess the memories were just too much. Story 62 Customs warehouses and mine storage facilities. How the rich buy, sell and store artwork and other valuables in customs warehouses because they only pay taxes on the items when they leave the warehouses, and then how they store valuables in mines that have been turned into high-security storage facilities. My ex-sister-in-law is a lawyer and spent a year doing research on a case in one of these facilities. She said it was insane just how high the level of security was inside the mine. Story 63 People who earned enough money to stop paying Social Security tax. Currently that is about $170,000 per year. In other words, by the time you earn $170,000 you stop paying the Social Security tax. People who max out their 401k account by February. People who open an LLC so they can dump money into a 401k after they maxed out their personal 401k. People who always pay cash for houses and cars. Story 64 Never really experienced how rich people treated service staff until I worked as a valet parking attendant. The entitlement and not even an eye contact from these folks. Bad tippers too. The dukes from trading places were no exaggeration. Story 65 My FIL and his second wife, would she be my step-MIL, used to have a separate fully furnished living room that was just for show. Nobody was allowed to sit in it because the furniture was white, and according to her, the dye from your jeans would rub off and discolor it. Story 66 Summer camp for the kids that costs $20 to $30K that includes a trip to Italy for skiing, in the summertime, plus $10K for the equestrian package. Often it's a legacy camp that several generations of the same bourgeoisie family has attended. Story 67 Probably already said, but buy a home, learning to save in your 401k, learning how to manage money, all of these things were beyond my parents and they didn't teach me these skills. I had to learn them as I was an adult. But even more importantly, I thought these things were basically impossible to achieve. Story 68 Many rich people start adulthood asset poor, since the real estate, mansion, cars, investments, etc., are held in a family trust. What they inherit is access. You'd be amazed how many people have trust funds supplementing their income conditional on employment. I work within finance and am surrounded by lazy rich people clutching the umbilical, but I was surprised to learn how many of my middle-class friends had them after they compared over a few too many drinks. There's so many closeted rich folks cosplaying as self-sufficient. Story 69 They pursue higher education to avoid getting a job and cause it's being paid for by their parents. Then they have all these degrees but don't do anything. Story 70 Garbage service. I'm from the middle of nowhere and we just take our trash to the landfill. We have to take our stinking trash to the dump, but a lot of people can just put it on the curb. Story 71 Property investment. I thought people only bought homes to live in, and landlords were people who were renting out their old homes to pay off their mortgages. Story 72 This thread made me want to be rich, and to think some people think that money doesn't buy happiness. Rich people bum rides on other rich people's private jets. Family friend is rich and visited us via the corporate jet. Told us about how she was somewhere and met name withheld. Someone even richer who offered her a return flight on their private jet she'd flown out public. When she boarded she met a guy who was also hitching a ride. He didn't know the jet owner personally, had just seen the jet at the airport, looked up the tail and flight plan, made a few calls and snagged an invite. Also, same friend regularly shops at Dollar Tree. We actually made a special trip there because she was looking for more of a specific item shed already bought out at her local stores, TJ Maxx and Ross. Story 73 was today years old when I learned some rich people have fridge drawers built into their kitchen islands like a stealth fridge just for beverages. Meanwhile, I grew up getting yelled at for opening the fridge too long. Story 74 This is probably dumb and a no-brainer, but that some people never actually work. Like, I thought being rich was like, you can have nice toys and pretty shiny things. I had no idea for so long that people actually don't have to work because they are so rich, and what that means for me as a person who is already so exhausted in my late 20s from work. Story 75. Traveling with just a small bag for your phone, wallet, keys, because you have different sets of clothes at your different houses. Yeah, growing up I had friends who had a place at the lake, but they always took clothes with them. Rich people have 2 sets of clothes, and people to wash them at each place. Story 76. Not grown up yet, but I know a guy in my year HS who didn't come to school for about week like thrice or so cause his family took him to attend campus open days of his dream universities outside the country. Story 77. The crazy thing is if you took someone who's worth a 100 million and he decided to give 1,000 to everyone in his town of 100,000 people, he'd be broke. That's the thing that blows my mind and something I bet the rich know. You can't help everyone, you can't even help a good amount of people because the numbers just don't work. Big population. Story 78. Family office. You have a company that essentially handles your money, investments, charities, purchases, and so on. Want a new Range Rover? Call Charlie and find the dealers, prices, colors, and have several lined up for you ready to test drive at your home. They purchase via the company, insure it, and it's waiting for you at your door. To keep a jar of Grey Poupon with me at all times. Story 79. Off menu. Who knew you could walk into a fancy restaurant and just ask for whatever you wanted regardless of the menu? Prices, pfft, no one asks about prices. Story 80. The freedom to actually live your life for yourself rather than some rich who hardly works at all to live free off your day in day out toil for just enough table scraps to keep you alive for the month, but not enough to live your own life for yourself. That's actually a lie. This was glaringly obvious to me even as a kid. Story 81. They use summer as a verb. I was in Newport visiting a college friend and her uncle took us out for dinner. He casually asked me where I summered. I could barely keep a straight face. We didn't have tons of money, but I went to college with lots of rich kids so I was being exposed to a totally different life. This was peak rich person moment. Story 82. This may be weird but I didn't know what a cul-de-sac was. Went to a rich girl's house and ordered up a pizza. When they asked if it was a house or apartment she told me to tell them it was a house on a cul-de-sac. Story 83. I had a classmate who would just casually shop for cars, big names online at least twice a month. She also casually asks her close friends what car do they like for their birthday. I thought cars were something you save up for years. Story 84. Lavish basements. Like movie theater with a wine cellar and separate bar. Basement's better than any house I'd been to and it was just the basement of the house. Living on golf courses. Like whole private gated towns built around a golf course and country club. Story 85. Super. Planning your child's college marketability. Making sure they have good extracurriculars. Teaching them how to write a good application, making sure they have time to do volunteer work, making sure they have transportation to and from these activities, investing heavily in their areas of interest and making sure those areas are cultivated. For instance, you don't just have a music teacher for one instrument, you have a music teacher for a couple of instruments and you pay to keep those tuned regularly, and you get the best instructor in your area. Story 86. Paying someone else $200 to stand in line outside Starbucks to buy you the new 50 limited edition Stanley Cup, which you never even drink out of, but put on a shelf next to 18 other Stanley Cups.